Hello, and welcome to our special presentation of our Genius of series, the Genius 100 Future of Education Report. I'm Hilary Viner, CEO of Genius 100 Foundation, a global philanthropic community inspired by Einstein. On behalf of the extraordinary Genius 100 team, founder Rami Kleinman, global ambassador Ido Aharoni, and Chief Community Officer Helen Hatzis, thank you so much for making the time to join us, either for the first time or again, for this very special Genius 100 Foundation event. We are delighted and honored to have several of our visionaries and esteemed community members and partners with us today, whom I will introduce in just a few minutes. We are also so happy to see so many visionaries, members of the community, and honored guests joining us via Zoom from around the world. And we want to give a special thank you to Genius of Series sponsor, BST Canada, and Ala Tanous, founding member of our community, president of Genius 100 Foundation Canada, and global G100 board member, for your generous support. And now for today's special event. Education is a core part of Genius. It is the pathway to our future. Let me start with how the Future of Education report came to be. Last fall, exactly a year ago tomorrow, Helen and I attended the Concordia Conference in New York, where we met Cordell Carter of the Aspen Institute. So in the truly big, small world we're in, we quickly realized that we share a few things. The belief in the power of connectivity, a responsibility for and commitment to a better future. This led to Cordell inviting Genius to partner with the Aspen Institute, its Project on Belonging, Tulsa Innovation Labs, and several other groups to be part of the launch of the Festival of the Diaspora. We were honored to be included and knew we had to come up with something truly special to contribute. We looked to our community and developed a targeted research study that included visionaries and community members from Afghanistan, Canada, India, Israel, Nigeria, and the US to participate. The launch event took place in San Juan this past February, and the Future of Education report was developed for that occasion and presented there. Now, 6 months later, we've tuned it up a bit and are presenting it to you, our global audience. So thank you again for joining us. On that note, here's a rundown for today. I will try to briefly introduce, no easy feat, the Genius 100 visionaries and community members participating today, present the Future of Education report, and then introduce Kate Robinson, who will join as our special guest to talk about the G100 Legacy Campaign, developed to continue the work of her late father and G100 visionary, Sir Ken Robinson. And here's where you come in. We'll be fielding questions from the audience at the conclusion of the conversation, so please do not forget to submit questions via the Q&A option located within your Zoom panel. At the conclusion of the Q&A, we'll be back to close things out and share some special announcements. So without further ado, let's get started. The Future of Education report was researched with several of Genius 100 visionaries and community members. Maggie McDonnell of Canada, Oby Ezekwesili of Nigeria, Anant Agarwal of India and the United States, Dr. Sima Samar of Afghanistan, and Genius 100 community member Yaacov Hecht of Israel. Anant is a Genius 100 visionary and CEO of edX. Oby is also a G100 visionary with a list of accomplishments as long as can be possible, and also recently taught at Yale, which will be very insightful to this topic. Yaacov Hecht is the founder of the Democratic Schools with its first location in Adara, Israel, and he'll be joining us today. Maggie McDonnell won the Global Teacher Prize in 2017 and is a G100 visionary from Canada. And Dr. Sima Samar is with us today as a G100 visionary from Afghanistan. To create a baseline for this report, we asked our participants 3 main questions, and what we got was a world of knowledge.
Really need young people to be able to critically analyze and reflect on issues of like race, inequity, gender, see power structures for what they are, and learn how they operate. Critical thinking is so essential. We need to teach empathy. We need to teach love. We need to teach connection. We need to get them to be doing action in the classrooms, action in the schools. Education should be alive. It should be dynamic. And I think when kids, we teach to their head, their hearts, and their hands, and we allow them to see themselves as solution makers, as leaders, as agents of change in their own reality, then what we're also doing is raising hope. And we do that by empowering teachers as well, you know, to be able to take on more responsibility, to be able to breathe life, fuller life into their education ideas and plans, and to really see themselves as a team with their students. The future of education is about head, heart, and hands.
Education globally is the future of the world.
I see the future of education accelerated by these three major trends. One is online lifelong learning, two, modular stackable learning, and three, blended learning for learners who are on campus.
I think that the most beautiful things that exist in the world, that we are different. The future of education will recognize that we are different. And this is wonderful that we are different, that we need different education process. And every one of us need to have interesting in different ideas and want to learn different things in different times with different people. And that's, I think, the future. We cannot keep the idea of classroom with 30 students with a teacher, and we need to move to a place that everyone become a teacher and everyone become a student. That the best way of learning something is to teach it.
The key findings from our global education research included post-pandemic emotional belonging, adaptive diversity, internet access, and continuous evolution. To go back to post-pandemic, our original report was developed on the heels of the pandemic, which across the board created a global issue in terms of catching up. Pandemic-related learning delays stacked up on top of historical learning inequities. The World Bank estimates that students in low-income countries have been left several years behind. Beyond learning, the pandemic has had a broader social and emotional impact on students globally. Emotion and belonging. Taking into account that each and every child is different, supporting the mental health and social emotional needs of students is a big challenge. As Maggie mentioned, we need to find ways to connect, engage, and embrace students. This is paramount. Providing opportunities to build confidence by giving students responsibilities and ownership will foster a sense of belonging. Adaptive diversity. To Yaakov's point, developing upon existing models, as well as recognizing that new models need to be created to align with the vast cultural and individual differences contained in our countries, cities, and communities. Encouraging communities to recognize, develop awareness, and a beyond-the-surface understanding of diversity will create a positive impact and allow those communities to prosper. Internet access. Internet access is a game changer. As of April 22, there were 5 billion internet users worldwide, which accounts for 63% of the global population. But conversely, that means 27% of the global population is without internet access. And students without internet access, during the pandemic in particular, were left even farther behind, and in what we call the digital divide. Thankfully, there are organizations like Close the Gap and Plan International, which specifically address not only the divide, but the gender inequality in regard to access to technology in underdeveloped regions. Continuous evolution. Several of our contributors bring up a version of this point, which centers around lifelong learning, that everyone, regardless of age and stage, should continue to seek knowledge, become better educated, and adapt toward the future. To that point, many jobs that were necessary or in demand even a decade ago are no longer. And with global lifespans continuing to increase, 73 years of age globally in 2022, that's this year, in order to stay relevant, productive, a continuous evolution is necessary. Sima, we're going to call on you first. We are at the year one mark of the rapid shift in Afghanistan. And again, we are so honored to have you with us today. As a globally recognized leader in women's rights and education, what are your thoughts regarding women's rights now? Is there progression or the opposite, and why?
Well, unfortunately, we just had the anniversary of the collapse of Afghanistan regime a few days ago. And it has been really difficult year, not only for the women in the country, but also for the majority of the people in Afghanistan. I think one of the main problem is that practically Taliban see half of the population, which is a woman, as an inferior, last value of the citizen, so second-class citizen. So in that kind of a mentality, you actually see that the equality is not there. They promote inequality and superiority of half of the population and inferiority of another half. And what they do actually, they stop they disturb the education system, and they, particularly for the girls, they stop the girls not to go to school from 7 to 12. It's very strange because they allow the primary school from 1 to 6th grade, and then they allow some universities, but they do not allow the middle part of the group, because when in few years, then we don't have anybody to go to university. And why is that? It shows that the education really empower the people. Education is key to change the mentality of the people. Education gives you the ability and self-confidence to stand and fight against your rights. Let me say also that, unfortunately, only going to school for a few hours doesn't mean that they get education. It should be a quality education for everyone. And that is something that we need to do. And Taliban are very much against education because they also somehow reduce the science subject in the boys' schools and increase the religious subject in the schools also. And they increase this religious madrasas. Taliban-style people themselves came from those madrasas, of those kind of school, by the way, those kind of educated, and they were brainwashed and become a group of ignorant, violent, and self-oriented, and they think that they are the one who is got the expression or the responsibility from the God to control the other people, and particularly control women. So education for women are really in bad shape. And it's really not only education, all their basic rights are taken and abolished by the Taliban.
Well, thank you again for joining us, Sima. And we're all globally sorry to hear what's happened in your country and what's happened with the state of education, and especially for women. And thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.
Moving over to Yaacov. We mentioned, in the report, what I've kind of titled adaptive diversity, and you're talking about the transparency and alignment within communities. Can you speak to that for a moment from your point of view? In going through, the intake from our interviews over the last 6 months, I've kind of dubbed what you talk about in terms of community, I call it adaptive diversity, in terms of, what you spoke to about the systems and creating this transparency among schools in your area. Can you just speak to that, if there's been any developments around your idea?
I think when we talk about the future of education, we can confuse and think what was in the past, that when we build the program to all the children as the same program, and we only check if they are in the same age. And this is, from my point of view, disaster. It's what's the connection between education and age, and why we do it. And so it's like we don't recognize that everyone brings something unbelievable to the flow of the earth, to do something in this place that we call it earth. And I think school not need to focusing about do the basic limit what everyone need to know. That's maybe one of the things, but the most important thing is to focusing or find the uniqueness of every one of us, to help the student to find what he brings to the world that no one else bring it, and to be brave enough to show his uniqueness and show his abilities. And that's something that I think the world is going for in the future.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We're going to come back to you after the next section as well on some of your comments.
Access to education is a basic human rights. Education is the strongest tool to resist against ignorance that we have in our country. Access to quality education is key in order to change the mentality of the people and to empower the people and reduce discrimination and violent activity.
That when we look at what the pandemic particularly has done over the last 2 years, there's so much research out there to show that kids have taken a real hit on their mental health, and student well-being needs to be at the core, of any education plan. And we really need to deconstruct that and look at that. And we need to think about teacher well-being and student well-being going hand in hand. In countries where girls' education has been a fight, that so many people have done so much work. And my biggest fear is that the pandemic may have unraveled that. And I really hope that governments, ministers of education are paying attention and that they're investing heavily into girls' education.
Today, we have big cities with a lot of schools inside the city. And every school is isolated from the other school. So if I am a student in one school, I don't know what happened in the other school. Also, the teachers have no connection between the schools. And to me, I don't understand how it's become this situation, but it's clear to me that it needs to be net between the schools, and every school needs to be focusing about different things, and children can move between schools and see as the city as a one big school, but not only the schools. It can be also factories, it can be shops, it can be restaurant. That it's also people come there and learning. It can be hospital. It can be everything that museums, sure. It can be that. So all what I see in my vision, that all the city become one big school, and in this school, a lot of people can be teachers and make a workshop, and a lot of people can be a student.
I see education as the future, the double future for my continent, the future for us to at least get to where other parts of the world have gotten to, but the even double future for us to surpass where others are. Education for me is the pathway through which my continent can lay claim to the 21st century. Who will claim the 21st century is still open to the jury. Countries have to go for it. If my continent or my country really goes for it through education, who says that we cannot surpass the achievements of those that have gone ahead of us? Nobody saw China coming 40 years ago. Nobody saw India coming 30 years ago. Nobody sees Africa with the prospects through education coming 10 years, 15 years from now.
So some of the key points coming out of that part of the research were access, collective community, educators, environmental teachability, sustainability, and impact investing. To explain a little deeper about access, to Maggie and Sima's points, this is a different point than funding. This is about truly having access, especially in regions where it's much harder for girls and women to get a quality education and a higher education, or where education is not treated as a basic human right. In order for societies to thrive in the future, every member must have access to a quality education. Collective community. Yaacov talks about educating communities collectively, creating transparency and shared resources so that students, teachers, members of the community can all have access to a real education beyond the classroom. Educators. Educators have an increasingly complex and vital role with many new challenges and more to come. They must get the same level of attention and resource as students. At the core of a good education is the bond between teacher and student. Environmental teachability. This goes back to Yaakov's point again, that we can learn from our environment, our communities, businesses, and so on. Oby touches on this point as well, that there's a difference between going to school and becoming educated. Sustainability. To Sima's point, education greatly helps to create sustainable communities. And impact investing in a quality education for all, for everyone, must be a priority. Now I'm going to turn this back over to our panelist, Yaacov. Back to you. In recent conversations that we've had in the last few weeks, you've mentioned a growing issue in Israel regarding the rapid decline of young people seeking careers in education, as well as the resignation of those that are or were educators. Can you tell us a little bit about this and its impact?
Yes, I think what happened now in Israel is very exciting. I think it's also connected to other countries, but in the last year, it was, I think, the first years that teachers begin to left school in the middle of the year. The great resignations, I don't know how to say this word in English, but a lot of people decide to left school. The number of young children and young teacher also begin to go down very dramatically. Less and less young people decide to be teachers. And I think these two evidence connect to, in the next 30 years, Israel plan to double herself by demographic. So we will have in the next 30 years double children than today, double school, and less teachers, and dramatically. And I think all these combination, when they are connect together, it brings something fantastic. It means that the whole system cannot exist. It cannot exist. Next year, we don't have enough teachers to open the next year. So we must think differently, because the old traditional way of teaching, teachers that come to a class and teach them all the day cannot exist. And in this situation, school need to begin to think, maybe connect other schools to make lessons together, maybe connect schools from other countries, and maybe teachers can teach in different places. It's need to ask the question, why teacher teach and student learn? Why we cannot build a learning communities that it's mixed generation, that everyone is a teacher and everyone is a student? Why not use much more online free access. All these question become not theoretical question, because this question was also 10 years ago, but that was very theoretical. Next year in Israel is in a week and a half, and all the principals of the schools need to find solution, because in most of the school we don't have like 10% of the teachers, and this is a great situation.
That is really fascinating news, and thank you for sharing that with us, because I think, in every part of the world, there's struggles between what's going on in the education system and how to take it, what we call the last mile, and that's a very big issue that's come from, like you said, theoretical to real. So we'll be really curious to get a follow-up from you in the next few months to see how things are going in that area of the world. So let's move on to our next video.
Governments around the world should all be hitting a certain minimum of what they're investing in education. No matter the question, education is the answer. So it should be properly funded in so many countries. Teachers are a key bottleneck in the education system, and that we need to continue to empower them, train them, and support them to really allow this education system to be as bold, as disruptive, as creative as we need it to be.
Well, I think one thing that we can do is that we should lobby for quality education everywhere, regardless of the culture, sex, color, religion that we believe, and geography. Because again, I insist that when we promote quality education and update education, scientific education to the people, then we reduce the environment for violent and gang groups and discrimination based on religion, based on gender, based on language that we speak, based on ethnicity. And that itself promote sustainable peace in this planet and promote, of course, equality between the human beings. We have this famous say, when you educate a man, you educate a person. When you educate a woman, you educate a family, and you educate a society. And education for women is really key in order to promote sustainable peace and gender equality in the world.
Both learners and teachers at an early age become familiar with digital online learning. Online learning is a skill, and so is online teaching. So therefore, we need to make sure that even as early schooling years, we need to make sure that our children, our learners, our students become familiar with online learning. In teacher training programs, we need to be sure to teach teachers on how to teach online, how to teach with digital modalities, and how to create the blended model for learning. Teaching people how to learn and teach in an online fashion will become very important in keeping with the three major global trends that are happening.
We can't be a world that in 21st century is still discussing whether women can lead. We can't be a world that is disdainful of talent of young people simply because they do not have age and experience on their side. There are just certain kinds of ways of thinking that must be discarded. And it will take a willingness to accept that we don't know. Teach me. That's education. Education is about the readiness to unlearn the things that no longer do us good, and the willingness to have the growth mindset to want to learn new things. And when we learn new things, to use them to create the momentum that supports everyone to be the best that they can be. Of our world is dependent on the willingness of every one of us to ensure that none of us is left blind to knowledge. We can't, in this world of today, have many more people be poor. There's no reason for it. I would say that our world has to see education as the new economy, human capital as the new big deal for everyone. All must be educated, not just go to school, but be educated.
So from that, we have a few key impact statements. First is to invest in pathways to equal access, communities, and teachers. Increased access through digital. We're seeing a real-time reimaginement of the role of technology. A growth mindset, adapting the traditional mindset of how we see our future. Transfer of knowledge, rethinking age and experience barriers. Evolution, understanding that learning is lifelong. Redefining the how we learn, where we gain knowledge, and how we can apply it. And humankind responsibility, continue to recognize the importance of caring for each other and influencing change. So we took all of this information and created, just 2 short slides here of what we see and what we can do to reimagine the future. What we see disruption, that we're living with constant change and uncertainty. We see that truth is a different definition that maybe some of us or most of us grew up with. The changing definition from a singular to a plural concept, the formation, proliferation, and recognizing the variety of narratives via open internet and media sources. I think we see that, coming through every day across our, any kind of channel that we look at, that there's different versions of what's going on in different truths. Providence, redefining where we live. There's a, balance of some sort between our life online, in the metaverse, in reality, and how those 2, 3, 4 places all create our own providence and where we actually are living in real time. Time itself, redefining the construct of time and how we use it. I think, as the world is coming out of the pandemic, we've seen that our lives have, continuing to shift around how we spend our time. People are coming out and wanting to do more and more events outside of living inside of Zoom. But then there's also that, blend. Where does the blend meet, and where do we spend our time? And how do we spend our time? Environment, understanding the tremendous impact of our changing climate. What we do, as Maggie said, we teach hope, strengthening positive emotional values and character. Reconstruct the systems that must be deconstructed, aligned, and adapted. We push for equality and the importance of a girl's education. Equitable distribution of resources, leveling the access to education. The role of the educator, elevating the role and also understanding its new role in our society. And last but certainly not least, a focus on health, protecting our minds, and really paying attention to mental health and wellness. So without further ado, I want to introduce our next guest and thank everyone who participated in that research study, Yaacov and Sima, for joining us today. And we'd love to have you stay on for the Q&A section if you have time to do that. But we're going to move on to introducing Kate. So now I want to introduce her as the CEO and co-founder of Imagine If and the SKR Legacy Collective. Kate is the daughter of Genius100 visionary and spiritist, the late Sir Ken Robinson. On May 31st of this year, we honored Sir Ken in 2 ways. First, we inducted Goldie Hawn as our 2022 Genius100 Legacy Visionary. She's our first G100 Legacy Visionary and was deemed so in honor of Sir Ken. At the end of that ceremony, we announced the G100 Legacy Campaign to further the work of Sir Ken under the direction of Kate and her husband, Anthony Dunn. Kate is going to join us in just a moment after we share Sir Ken Robinson's vision statement, drafted for and included in our book, Genius100 Visions of the Future. This tribute is comprised of members of the G100 visionary community.
For our children to thrive now and in the future, we have to reimagine education.
Imagination and creativity are at the root of every uniquely human achievement. Poignantly, they have now brought us to a critical pass. Our appetites
are straining the Earth's capacity to sustain us, and our attempts to force it to do so are fueling a holocaust of other species. Our technologies are evolving exponentially, but spiritually and emotionally, we're not keeping pace.
To meet these existential challenges, we have to harness our creativity to a more sustainable vision of the lives we hope to lead. Mass systems of education are based on conformity, standardization, and competition, and they are failing us badly.
Our children urgently need forms of education based on diversity, creativity, and collaboration.
Diversity. Human capacities are stunningly diverse, which is why human accomplishments are so breathtakingly multifarious. Rather than focus on a particular forms of academic ability, education should cultivate and celebrate this diversity.
Creativity. Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. He did not mean that fantasy is more important than facts, but that the boundaries of knowledge are constantly reset by bold visions and transcendent questions.
Collaboration. We are social creatures. Every civilization is built on a fragile ecology of ideas, systems, and expertise, only a fraction of which any one of us can understand. As Einstein puts it, the aim of education must be the training of independently acting and thinking individuals who see in the service of the community their highest life problem.
Around us and within us, we all have the resources that we need to be able to meet the challenges that we face.
The only way to develop and focus these resources is through forms of education that reconnect us with the natural world of which we are part, and the deeper qualities that make us who we are.
Cold reason is not enough. As Einstein noted, we've learned by painful experience that rational thinking does not suffice to solve the problems of our social life.
The lesson we most need to learn is that there's more to life on Earth than human beings. And there's more to being human than self-interest.
Our futures all depend on learning this lesson by heart.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Genius100, for having me. And thank you once again for that incredible video. I always find it very emotional to see it because I think that my father's contribution to the Genius100 book, his vision of the future, is incredibly beautiful to begin with. But when you hear it spoken by such inspiring voices, it becomes even more powerful. And I remember the first time I saw it just being so overwhelmed by that, by the coming together of these amazing people to share his vision statement. It was something that Genius100 put together for a celebration of my father's life that we did for his first birthday following his passing in March 4th, 2021. So my father passed away, Serkan Robinson, he passed away in August 2020. And one of the most devastating things about his passing, and I think, speaking as his daughter, it would have always been devastating. But on a global level, I think one of the most devastating things is the timing, because we've never needed his message more. And we've heard today from Oby and from Sima, from Yaacov, from Maggie, we've heard today so much about the state of education globally and, many places, particularly Afghanistan, just how dire and desperate it is. And we've also heard, particularly from Yaacov and Oby, we've heard these voices of hope. And what struck me, I was fortunate enough when my father passed away, he asked me to finish his last book that he was writing, it was his manifesto. It was published in March this past year. It's called Imagine If, Creating a Future for Us All. And he asked me to write it just before he died. And it was, a terrifying project to take on because his life's work was so prolific. How do you narrow it down? I think the original brief was for 10,000 words. So how do you boil that down into something so succinct? The short answer is that I didn't. It was, I think, the final version of 26,000 words. But in order to sort of get myself ready for it, I read and reread everything that he'd already written. I watched all of his talks, and I tried, in particular, the book's written in his tone of voice. So I tried very hard to get that into my head. And what struck me is, all of my life, and certainly, my adult life following his career, I had these preconceived notions about what his work was about. And I don't think I was totally wrong, but a lot of it I saw as being a criticism of these systems that we've created, of these things that we've put in place, in particular our education systems, but also our businesses, our cultures, our organizations. And actually what struck me when I was rereading all of his work is that while it was a criticism of these things, it was also very much a celebration of what we as a species are capable of creating if we get the conditions right. And I put this in the book, but I really feel it was a love letter to human potential. And in the same way that Oby and Yaacov were talking, my father had hope. He had hope that despite these incredible difficult times that we are living in, and we argue in the book that we really are at a critical pass, that we've come to a crossroads in our shared history as a species and our evolution, that not only are the systems that we put in place, in particular education systems, not only are they now not serving us, but I actually think that they're damaging us, and we cannot continue as we are. But the hope comes from the fact that these systems that we've created are human-made systems. And that means because we created them, we can also recreate them, we can reimagine them. And Dad made the case that imagination is what separates us out from the rest of life on Earth. It's why that Einstein quote, that imagination is more important than knowledge, is in his vision statement. Other creatures live in the world as they find it, but we create the worlds in which we live. We imagine better realities for ourselves, and then we use our powers of creativity to make them, to bring them into existence. And we're at a point in our species, in our evolution, where we absolutely have to. And much like the natural systems, the ecosystems that you see in the natural world thrive on diversity. If you look at, say, a forest, you look at all the different creatures and the plants and the light, and the moss and everything that brings it together to make it thrive. And we know, because we keep doing this, we keep going in and damaging the systems. If you remove any element, if you remove the diversity, the ecosystem fails. It's something that Dad actually said in his Genius100 talk at the launch event, which I think was in 2017, but Hillary, don't get cross if I'm wrong on that one. He said that the natural world thrives on diversity, but education is built around the concepts of conformity. And he's right. Our human ecosystems are much like natural ones. We thrive on a diversity of skills and talents and passions. And not only are they not encouraged in our education systems, they're actually actively discouraged. They're squashed in favor of a very small, narrow view of subjects that are deemed to be important over all others. So the power is in our hands, though, because if we created these systems, we can recreate them. And, Genius100 brings together these incredible visionaries who are dedicated to creating a better future for us all. And that's what we're dedicated to with our legacy activities for my father. So shortly before he passed away, myself and my husband committed to my dad that we would dedicate the rest of our lives to continuing his work. And that wasn't just because of the affection that we had from him on a personal level, but it's because his work was so important. And there were two things that struck me immediately when it came to continuing his work. The first was that it's not our job to establish his legacy. The work he did was so important. He changed the lives of millions of people around the world. And we know because they contact us, they tell us about it. People who believed something was wrong with them, when in fact it was actually the system that was failing them. And these people, in their own way, in their lives, they're continuing his legacy each and every single day by committing to the lives that they are living. So we aren't alone when it comes to creating his legacy, but also we better not mess it up, because he's not here to help us with it. And it's so special to so many people because it's so personal and it resonates. We're very fortunate because it's such a big legacy. And one of the first activities that we're doing, so it's something that he asked us to do, but Dad left us absolutely everything. And when I say everything, I don't want to use the term hoarder, but he kept everything. So we have, his own notes from his time in education, right the way through to the talk notes from his last speech that he gave in the spring of 2020. And in every talk that he ever gave, he wrote down 3 or 4 bullet points and put them in his jacket pocket, which he very rarely ever looked at when he was on stage, but he'd come back and put them in a shoebox, categorized by date, which is incredibly helpful. So we have every talk note that he ever gave. We have his awards, we have his correspondence. He wrote notes to himself in full sentences, which again is very helpful. So unsurprisingly, we are embarking on his archive. But in the spirit of creativity, in the spirit of imagination, what we're looking to do is establish a state-of-the-art physical facility that will also serve, so it will house the physical archive, but it'll also serve as a place where people can come to learn, to connect, to collaborate. There'll be courses and retreats. It'll be a place where people can come to thrive and to reimagine the world together. And it will also be an interactive digital archive, so people around the world can experience it through the metaverse, as Hillary commented on earlier. We are beyond delighted to be partnering with Genius100 on the Sir Ken Robinson Legacy campaign. As Hilary said, being selected as one of the 100 visionaries was a huge highlight of my father's life and of his career. And we hope through this that you'll get involved, that you'll reach out to either Hilary and the team at Genius100 or myself and Anthony and help us create this incredible life-changing archive of international significance. Thank you, Genius100, for having me.
Thank you, Kate. And I could never be crossed with you, first of all.
Oh,
but secondly, that was totally the right thing.
Good, okay.
No, but it was 2017. I actually was fortunate enough to be there because our dear friend Ido Aharoni dragged me there. He said, you have to come to this event. You have to see what we're doing. And I thought, what is he talking about? I'm busy. I don't want to go to Montreal right now. But I'm so glad it changed my life.
Oh, it must have been such a... I mean, I've seen some of the other... Dr. Miramedi was there. I mean, that must have been amazing.
It was absolutely... I don't think I'll ever in my lifetime see anything like anywhere near that again. It was just, I mean, other than some of the things we do at Genius, like, kind of talking to Soichi from space was kind of cool. But I mean,
like that.
really, But thank you for joining us. And I just wanted to mention, we have gotten our first major gift towards the Genius100 Legacy campaign from Libra Social, and we thank them very much for that, to start the initial work on the digital campus of the SKR Legacy Archive. And we are about to kick off, which you will all be getting in your email box shortly, some of the marketing and some of the initiatives that we're putting forth under the G100 banner to continue to raise funds and awareness of this terrific and much needed archive. So I don't know if the panel is still here. We have about 2 minutes. Hi, everyone.
I want to say that I sent Kate a big hug and wow.
Hi, it's so lovely to see you. It was wonderful to hear everything you were saying as well. It's been too long.
Yeah, I hope so. But I send you now a big hug.
Thank you.
And Sima's here as well. Hi, Sima.
Yeah,
so it's just,
thank you so
does
much.
anyone have any closing, thoughts? I know we had so much data, and I feel like I'm sitting on a, treasure trove of information from the participants that, took part in the Future of Education report. And I'm happy, we'll send this all around to everyone. I feel like I barely scratched the surface on all of these topics that we rattled off today, because each and every one could kind of warrant its own webinar. But to Yaacov and Sima, are there any closing comments you have about, where we are now compared to even where what we started talking about 6 months ago?
Thank you very much. I think, well, 6 months ago, at least, we didn't have so much fighting and war. I think it's the war against women is more common than since 6 months ago in different ways. In this country, abortion bans and Ukraine war and more refugees, and inflation in most of the countries because of the war. So these are something that we like it or not, it does have negative impact on the education. So we need to stand strongly and united in order to fight this battle.
That's true. And Yaacov, what about you?
I think it's very difficult to see something in 6 months in education. And I am very optimistic because I see these 6 months part of the last 20 years that we move in education. And these 20 years, I see a lot of change. For example, if you take a new school that built now in most of the world, it will be totally different from the new school that was 20 years ago. And it will be change in the physical. I think the school today become more and more something unbelievable. Place that people can live, thinking about good condition to the teacher, good condition to the student. It's not all over the world, but in a lot of places, you can see very good places that call school that not was exist 20, 30 years ago. And that's give me a lot of hope. Also, I think the rights of the teachers and the importance of good quality education become much more stronger. So I agree with Sima that the situation now, in this moment, we have a lot of problem. Maybe also in the last 3 years, we have a lot of problem. But meanwhile, I see something that going and change to a good position. That if in the past people think about school and I can tell them, imagine what school connect you, and people say prison or factory. I think today more and more we can see education system that look like place that I want to be. Nice place. Place that I can grow. And that's very new things that happen today. Maybe in the past it was a unique private schools that we can see such a school. Today we see more and more state school that look different and act different. I will give you example. We 2 weeks ago we have IDEC, the International Democratic Education Conference, and for example, from South Korea, it's come a very interesting state school that children choose what they want to learn, how they want to learn, with whom they want to learn in South Korea. And that was a very strong part of education. Or from Indonesia, come a group of educators that try new ideas. And I think the idea, and that's, I think, connect to what Kat say, that the strong vision of Ken Robinson was the hope. And I think today we can see much more people that brave enough to do their education, what their dream. And it's growing. And I am fascinated from these young people that have a brave to change everything.
It's true. That's, I'm smiling because there is a message of hope within all of this. And, we're really looking forward to promoting, continuing to promote the ideas and the vision of Sir Ken Robinson through Genius100 Legacy. And, through everything that we can do to promote hope and to promote the future of education. So we are out of time by a minute, actually, at this point. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. I was going to do some upcoming announcements, but everything will be sent out via email and on our website. And thank you again for coming and joining us to see and hear the Future of Education report and to visit with Kate and learn about all the good work she's doing. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.